and welcome to the spring edition of eHex TV, the 96th edition. And yeah, now let's get started with the very first question. And the very first question is the interesting one. It's about my impression of Quarkus Renarde, and I think it's French. And I know it's French because I look it up. And Renarde, I hope it's pronounced correctly, with perfect French accent. And Renarde means fox. And this is a framework. So if we go to that, we will see that, where's the Renarde? Yeah. It is a very early stage. So there are some stars, so you can start it, of course. And it is a new server-side web framework with Qt templating language. And I actually used already Qt in the past, because in one project I used Mustache with Nashorn, and I was just too lazy to port it to recent Java, so I used just Qt for that. So it worked well. So now, what is about and why we need another web framework, or why we need? I was asked about the my impression. So I would like to go straight to the code and review the code a bit. So this is just an HTML template. It was written 2 months ago. And the syntax here is with the Qt templating language, which is fairly easy to learn. It's like if-else statements within, it's like almost like a JSP without JSP's Java server pages. And if we walk through the code, so the most interesting part, so there are templates. As you see here, check templates, template, static native template instance main. And what main means, it refers to a file with the name main. So there is somewhere a main here, main HTML. So there's one-to-one relation between both. And so there are a couple of such templates. So if we go here, there's so this is like the setup. We have you see the application has a templates, index, and about. And so there is also an index and about file. So this is actually a nice way for convention of a configuration to match to the specific template. So or to match to link Java code to specific HTML file. This is what I wanted to say. And so we have so go through the code. It's a to-do application, a sample application. So we have emails template with mail template instance confirm user. So there seems to be a little bit of logic. So if we go to the let's see, there should be confirm. Is it confirm? And you can see here login complete, confirm new user. And it seems like somewhere here. There's also relation between the actions or buttons here and the controllers, or how to call it, or Java classes, which are called behind the scenes. So what this Fox web framework seems to do is there is an HTML template which renders some logic from or renders the text from a model. And if we have action listeners, let's see here, we have button type submit, complete registration. And we have URI login complete. And if we go here to the login, there is somewhere confirm, and it was complete. Where is the complete? Yeah, complete. So this gets, the complete, this gets all the parameters from the form here. So this is actually a nice way to write application fast. So what is my opinion on that? So I use already Qt. So I think it is fine to implement something completely proprietary. So the framework here is fine for admin pages. Of course, it's a moving target. This is very early stages. And I like what I see. It's an interesting way of implementing web apps with Java. And Corkus is fairly popular. So also nice touches here, user. So you can go here, search for the user, and it uses here find for confirmation, a typo here. And if we are model the user, we see this is entity. which is a panache, which is an extension of JPA. So we have static methods directly on the entity for searching and on the operations. So what the Renarde is, we have panache, which records panache for persistence, and this is the model which is directly exposed to the templates. And the to do here, for instance, so we have to do is panache entity, which is owner, task, done, and done date, find by owner, and let's see whether I will find the to do template. Login tags to dos and index, and we will see that here to do's done, to do ID, so I can directly refer to this to do's done here. So I can directly use the panache entities, and panache entities are JPA entities. Yeah, will it take off? I mean, nothing will take off, right? We have too many frameworks already, but it's an interesting way. If you build a small application, why not? And so what is the advantage of this over JAX-RS plain, microprofile JAX-RS, and what I prefer in the front-end web components? What you get here is what you also get with JSF, Java Server Faces, is data binding, the communication between the front-end and the back-end already happens. Here, you don't have to implement it by yourself, whereby if you would like to implement a web component application, you have the problem that you implement the front end, and then this is like a fat client which communicates with the back end. And this looks, I would say, almost like Struts, completely refactored, right? Or JSF. So I would say really interesting. And what's also nice, I took a look at the OIDC setup here. So it comes with OpenID Connect. And what's interesting here, so application properties, if you take a look on this, it already ships with Google, GitHub, Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, and all the configuration. So I would say this is typical Quarkus. So they ship the functionality well integrated with the ecosystem. So I would say this is interesting to watch. Let's see what happens with it. And what I don't like in general, I saw this several times already. So is this that it has nothing to do with the app. I found somewhere the blocking annotation, which seems to be needed to have traditional JAX-RS. Without the blocking, you get the reactive JAX-RS or REST easy from Corkus. And reactive makes sense for some use cases, but doesn't make sense for everything. So I would prefer to have the blocking a configuration, maybe property, and not be forced to put blocking everywhere. To have my old-fashioned request response, blocking request response. So this is a general feedback to the blocking annotation. So yeah, so interesting for all of you. Your homework is to review the code until next time. So we have a chat about that. Okay, this was about the Fox framework, and this is what I showed you right now. Is this sample app. The framework is not ready to use. You will have to build it from command line, but still interesting. So okay, so now this was the question from Pete. Now the Hans Pickemat, friend of the AirHacks TV show, and he also attended several times the AirHacks Live. Thank you for that. And by the way, AirHacks Live is around the corner. It is going to be on March 31st. Is the next workshop. And what we will cover in this workshop is we'll go think about implementing a truly serverless Lambda applications, and with AWS Lambda, and talk a little bit more about not that traditional data sources like DynamoDB, SNS, SQS, and I believe if you do something from scratch, you can, or if you have to do something in the cloud, you should consider this first. And if this doesn't work, then lift and shift or whatever. But still, we will use a lot microprofile and Jakarta APIs because there is no reason to use esoteric libraries in the cloud. And of course, focus on productivity and performance as always. Okay, and in May is something maybe even more interesting. So what I plan to do is just a walk through ready-to-use CDKs and templates and achieve even more because we cannot just build everything from scratch in one-day workshop. So I will prepare things and will cover, I would say, the most cloud stuff you can cover in one day because I will prepare some stuff. Okay. This was the EHEX Live, and Hans Pickemet already. And what I remember, Hans, you attended the workshops, and you were surprised that there are multiple attendees because you could. I think you registered via Meetup, and you say, okay, but we were just 3 attendees. Yeah, but the attendees are coming through various channels. Okay, so this was the EHEX Live. What I also, if you like, take a look at the Qt templating engine, which is I don't know old, but I would say at least 3 years, and it was always there in Corkus as I remember. And the Renarde web library is based on Qt, and this is really useful if you would like to generate small things, small views, or simple views, not small. Yeah, this was the Renarde, and now, the Hans Pickemet, now to his question, is he says the constraint validator from Bean validation, you cannot inject stuff to the constraint validator, which is true, but you can inject stuff into the constraint validator factory. So the injection should be available. And if you go to my blog and you search for the constraint validator, and actually the spec, then there is explained the Jakarta context and dependency injection, which is CDI, and there's the validator factory and validator where the dependency injection is supported, and constraint validator factory is also supported, but not the constraint validator itself. Why not? Because it is more like it is non-contextual constraint validator because it can implement cross-check validation, but in the factory it is. So you could actually inject your stuff in the factory and then pass it to the constraint validator if you like, and the constraint validator is similar, I would say, to entities. There's also no dependency injection in the entities. And your question is CDI current select is not is not. If not, is there another way to inject beans? This should actually work because the constraint validator is going to be called in the same thread or transaction. So CDI current.select.get should work there as well. And is there another way? Yeah, maybe through the factory. So if there is a way, I don't know it, the API out of the box, whether you can pass, the injected stuff from the factory to the constraint validator, this would be a way. Okay, the next question was from YouTube, actually. It was one of the comments. And the question is simple. What is the benefit of Quarkus dev mode? Because, this is a valid question because I don't use Quarkus dev mode very often. Why not? Because the production mode is very fast as well. And what I usually do, I have a small script which starts the Quarkus in 1 second or 2 and it works. But what you get with the dev mode is a launch profile in Quarkus. So what you can do is if you run Quarkus in dev mode, you can configure Quarkus differently to production mode. So you could use in dev mode a different resource database with different IP address, or you can reconfigure completely the Quarkus by prefixing a %dev. For instance, if you prefix %dev dot, then it will use this prefix in application properties, this configuration instead of production mode. So in production mode, all the properties are working without any prefix, and in dev mode with this prefix. And this is really useful. And what dev mode also does, it is configured to have the Swagger UI and the Quarkus like admin console almost, so the dev space, so q/dev, which is also nice and is not available per default in production mode. So I would say the Quarkus dev mode is a nice or is a useful profile for you can use it, of course everybody knows that with Quarkus dev mode it automatically reloads resources, not only bytecode but also resources like Kafka topics or whatever is related to this. Okay, now let's see. Hi Luis, also friend of the show, and he also attended the AirHacks multiple times, so thank you for this. So there are no further questions in the chat, and also not in Twitter. Okay. Now, also a question from YouTube is a comment from, what are the killer use cases of CDI event and observe? So actually, currently, in my current project, we're thinking about using CDI events. It is not very common to use them, but so what is the super killer use case for CDI events? They are transactional. What does it mean? If you have a method which is annotated with transactional, you can have observes. Let's see whether I will find a blog post. Adam Bean CDI transactions, probably 10 years old. Yes, you see, not 10, 9 years old, so almost. So you can inject the event actually, and you can fire the event here. And you see what I did here. I'm rollbacking the transaction here. So doing this, what happens then is this event is always delivered. This event which observes transaction after success is only delivered in case the transaction is committed, and after failure only on rollback. So why it's nice? Because you can just fire the event, implement a listener, and if exception happens somewhere, runtime exception, the event is either not delivered to after success or delivered for after failure, which is really useful. This would be but I don't know whether we will use the event in current project, but what is also nice, just imagine you have two larger subsystems, and one subsystem processes something and emits events. So the another subsystem can just listen to the events. So you get something like internal messaging inside the application. It's rare, but sometimes it is useful. But the killer use case from the technical perspective is transactional event delivery. Now, clarification. And Markus Kett is the CEO of the company called MicroStream, and they have a nice persistence serializer and persistence library, in-memory library, which is crazy fast. And he also organizes the JCon conference. And we had a MicroStream serverless talk, and I was invited. And before the talk, he told me at the JCon conference, so Markus also organizes the JCon conference in Düsseldorf, and I think this year even in Munich. And what Markus told me, that I was very at the last JCon conference, it has to be 2017, 2018, I was against Lambda, and I thought about this. Okay, yeah, I'm always against the newest hype. And then I remembered what I actually, because I had to perform some code reviews in my projects, and I also found some lambdas which are questionable, and so I would like to clarify that because it's an interesting part. So, and what I remember, what I did at the conference, I showed this following code, and this is the official code from AWS. And what this explains is we have this is a lambda, Java lambda. With handler request, input stream, output stream, and context. And what you have to do here, you create your listeners, and then you can you get your event from listeners, your streams, and then you can deserialize your payload from the stream, and then you get your JSON, and you can do something with it. Right. And why I remembered the code is because the lambdas I reviewed were written in TypeScript, and what they did, they got the JSON object from outside, and they implemented like a huge switch statement. If post HTTP post, we do this with this parameter, and this remembered me, the early days we had servlets implemented in our own web framework. So okay. And what I said in JCon was, I remember, is this is crazy. It looks for me like Java from the 1960s. When you implement everything by hand, and this is just crazy to implement such a thing. If we have application servers, which are way easier to use, it's pointless to use such a thing. And if I go to the cloud, I mean, before I implement such a thing, I would go to Docker container, ECS Fargate, or whatever. So, but if you scroll it a little bit upwards, so this lambda looks a little bit more reasonable. So this is an asynchronous lambda, and could make sense in specific use cases. But what I'm actually doing in my projects is I don't care about the lambda that much, because we already have nice Java ecosystem. And if we, for instance, let's see, go to this here and take a look at the source code, this is a lambda, but there's actually no difference to a microprofile application, right? So this is why what I like about serverless, I can just use my microprofile code and run it as lambda. Why I'm doing this? Yeah, because I don't have to to configure the infrastructure a lot, and it's very cost effective or even cheap. So 1 million gigabytes second per month, and you pay nothing, and it is cheaper than Kubernetes or Docker containers or EC2. So except you have a heavy load, then EC2 is of course always cheaper. But yeah, this was the clarification. So what I meant by that is, it is crazy to pick low-level lambda just to be serverless and implement everything by hand. It doesn't make any sense to me, because you are not very productive, and if you're not productive, you will lose a lot of time. You are slower, and then it will cost you more money than you just shipping a application server to a even Kubernetes cluster. So this is clarification. So what I don't like is was the low-level code I showed you earlier, and I probably said this multiple times in various conferences. So not yeah, this is just too much. And what I really like is the serverless model, because for me, the serverless in the cloud is what application servers always were, actually, if you think about this. It's very similar concept. So don't focus on infrastructure, just on the business logic, push your thin war, and it just runs. And I don't have my thin wars anymore, but I have somehow small function.zips. I push it to the cloud, and the infrastructure just does something with it. And I have my old code on new infrastructure. Okay, so I hope it's clear. Let's see. Are there any questions? Please refresh questions. Yeah. I will try refresh the questions. Refreshing questions. Okay, so I guess someone asked more questions. Very good. But I forgot how your first name is pronounced. I knew how your first name is pronounced, but I mean Alchuk, maybe Alchuk. It's probably perfectly pronounced. But we discussed Dynamic Domain Model millions of times, or AirHacks TV, but we'll do it once again, just for you. And he's also a friend of the show, and he also attended the airhacks.com workshops in Munich, on Munich Airport. So I remember this exactly. So, okay, but lambdas. The next one is another friend of the show, Mr. Daniel Vamara. He also attended the AirX.com workshops, and he asked me for the following. I'm working on online voting system for an African country. I'm not allowed to name, and one of my biggest concerns is is preventing DDoS, distributed denial of service attacks. I'm building the entire solution with Corkus. which is reasonable. And that will be hosted on Rancher, which is also nice. Rancher is very similar to, this is like Kubernetes, but it is Kubernetes, but easier to use. So with nice UI, it is similar to OpenShift. And I would like to know how you will do things if you were in my shoes. So citizens in the country are supposed to vote from all over the world. So Daniel has to allow traffic from all over the world, and will be huge. And I don't want to have neither false negative nor positive in case of high traffic and misinterpret the DDoS. How I can configure or implement service to react to DDoS? Now, almost impossible by yourself. Why? So what you will need multiple, as many as you can, endpoints or independent internet lines. Why this? Because a single DDoS will saturate your line, and then no one will be able to vote. That's the very first problem. So the more endpoints, or how to call it, the more IP addresses, independent IP addresses in the internet you have, and what an attacker will do, it will probably pick such a line, and all the others will still run. So this is the first requirement. So as you already see, it's not that easy to implement. Then the next thing is, if you just focus on Quarkus, so we are operating on the layer 7, I think, so the application layer. So we understand HTTP. If you would like to mitigate DDoS, you will have to operate at level 4 at least. And what it means is, what you will probably would like to do is, you will only would like to accept valid HTTPS request, for instance, and just reject right away everything else. And this is going to be harder. So, for instance, and on AWS, the application load balancer already does that. So it only allows, valid TCP/IP connections. On HTTPS connections the first. There's another service called AWS Shield, I believe, which also helps you to mitigate DDoS attacks. And what AWS also does, with Route 53, you can have, the Route 53 will monitor the traffic worldwide and route the users to the closest locations. And the closest location means there will be multiple locations or regions. So, but it is going to be more expensive to you. But the DDoS are going to be harder and harder, because the attacker will have to be able to generate a lot of traffic to saturate the pipeline of AWS. Now, I guess you say, okay, AWS maybe is too expensive, or I don't like to use AWS or whatever. What is another possibility? Another possibility is to use Cloudflare. And Cloudflare is one of the leaders in DDoS protection, but they also have some, I would say, limitations. I remember there was one of security researcher who was attacked, and they were also said, okay, we always cannot mitigate this attack because it's too big. And but Cloudflare also an option. So if you say, I would like to do the minimum, so what you can do then, use something like Nginx, and if you search for Nginx, you will also find that Nginx out of the box also supports some basic DDoS mitigation. But again, if you have just one internet connection or two internet connections, I will generate a brutal traffic. I will saturate, the internet connection, your internet connection or your line, and then you're offline anyway. So this is a brief explanation. So what I would do, so I would probably, if possible, go to public cloud and buy a service, because to implement everything from scratch is almost mission impossible, I would say. And if you cannot go to, because you already mentioned Rancher, which implies you will probably run on premise, because why to run Rancher in the public cloud if I have AWS Lambda, Azure function, or Oracle Cloud Function? So yeah, so on premise, maybe at least look at Nginx, or I don't even know, HR proxy should be similar, DDoS prevention. Because what you need is, you need a load balancer with, I didn't look at that, but HR proxy should also be possible, because you need something which operates on the protocol level 4 and not 7 is too late. So because what you would like to do is, you have to reject everything which are invalid TCP/IP connections or attacks. Or what I forgot to mention, if you're using AWS Lambda, what you can also do, use API Gateway. And with API Gateway, you can have a throttling. You say, okay, no, from specific regions or addresses and only allowing, this amount of traffic. Okay, Daniel. So what I wanted to tell you, your project is interesting, but also challenging. Okay, this was the gist. Florin, sorry. I think Florin, I know you from somewhere, and you are focusing, which is always good. Is there a way to integrate Log4j with Wildfly? So first, why? If this is a Java util logging or Joule would be more interesting. And I have to admit, I didn't work with Wildfly for a long time because I replaced in most projects Wildfly with Quarkus. And in Corkus it absolutely is. So if you go to Quarkus logging, you can use Log4j, you can use Java util logging, which I prefer, and they are going to be redirected to JBoss log manager. So this is not exactly answer to your question, but if you go to Quarkus logging Joule, Java user logging, configure logging, you will find that Corkus supports Joule, which I usually use, JBoss logging, SL4j, and Apache Commons logging. And it also uses JBoss logging, so I assume the Wildfly configuration is going to be similar. And as I remember, I also used on Wildfly usually Java util logging. I never use Log4j actually, but Java util logging I always try to pick the JDK solution. So this is what I can tell you. So I had no time to research your question in depth, but but with Quarkus I'm using Java util logging, and it looks in the logs. And what I do on Quarkus, I use Java util logging with JSON structured logging, and it works perfectly. Yeah. So half answered question, Florin. So Mr. HBI says, okay, basically he would like to have an interceptor without reflection. And he says the method parameters are not available, but as you probably know, you can activate them. Starting with Java 8, I think, you can have method parameters available for reflection. And now is the question, is it possible to create an annotation processor that programmatically creates an interceptor or decorator? It's very possible, and the easiest possible way to use Quarkus, because this is actually what the Quarkus extension is doing, or Micronaut is also a similar technology. And if you take a look at Micronaut, this is actually what Micronaut is doing. It is reacting to annotations and is generating code. So even if you not using Micronaut in production, you can take a look at Micronaut and maybe use a subset of Micronaut to generate the bytecode. And if you are using Quarkus, then you can just use implement and bytecode extension, and then you could actually do this. Because what you could do, you could use reflection at build time and generate bytecode for runtime. So it is possible. Yeah. And Mr. Alchuk, I think. It's pronounced perfectly, right? Oh, lots of questions. So, but let's let's answer this one. Anemic domain model. The question is, what is my opinion, right? And there is a rich domain model and an anemic domain model. So, anemic domain model can be a best practice. When Java records, right? If you think about this could be an anemic domain model. This is not like doesn't have to be rich, but if you take a look at Java record from Java 17, for me, it's an anemic domain model. So, but even if in simplistic projects, so currently I'm also working on a class which is serialized to JSON. But even then, it is for me easier to put some code to the POJO validation logic, some additional methods, and everything is in one place, easier to understand, easier to unit test. if my class would be anemic, then I have the problem the logic should be somewhere else, and I have to look at two classes. So for me, looking at one class is easier to maintain, to test, than maintaining two classes. So this is my answer. So anemic domain model, in very specific cases, can be a benefit, or I mean, what anemic domain model actually is going to be. It is a data transfer object without any logic, which is Java record, and Java record is a best practice, I could say. If you would like to have a simple data transporter, write a Java record. If you have a more complex logic, maybe you will have to write a Java class. And this is, I already have Java 17 right now, but the Java records are still rare because I always find a way to put more logic to the Java record, and it becomes a Java class. Of course, you can have methods in Java records, but you shouldn't modify the state. Okay, so this was my and of course, this anemic domain model is actually an anti-pattern. So this is what Martin wrote back then. And why that? Because if you think about this, if you have inheritance, it doesn't make any sense, because you don't need polymorphic logic if there is no logic. So how to put it? Even in the framework Renarde with Quarkus, I would say it was not an anemic domain model. It was actually rich. These panache entities can have methods with logic. And in the simple to-do application, validation logic is the easiest to implement in the to-do model itself before I do it in the templates, right? So, yeah. Okay, perfect. So, I think we are done. And the next AirHacks is going to be in Spring, except we have some logics here. From Fernando Comunello. Is pronounced perfectly, I guess. Wunrent. No idea what it is. Which caching solution do you prefer? Infinispan or Redis? Or Caffeine in Quarkus? Also perfect. I would prefer in Corkus Infinispan over Redis, because Redis is external and Infinispan is a part of Corkus. Having said that, for external, if I'm on AWS, for instance, before I install Infinispan, I would use it's not called, how it's called, not Redis cache, how it's called, the service, I forgot the name of the service. AWS Redis is called Elasticache. So I can use just Elasticache on AWS, and I get more or less managed Redis, so I don't have to care about all the setup. So Elasticache on AWS, and if I'm not on AWS on premise, I would pick Infinispan over Redis. And if I just on Quarkus, I will use Caffeine, which is the standard caching solution. By the way, there is a podcast with the creator of Caffeine, and we had a chat, also Caffeine. This is with Ben Mains, I think. And we had a chat how Caffeine happened and why it is so fast. And also Caffeine is a part of Infinispan. So take a look on that, or take a listen on that. Now, both integrate well with Corkus and Wildfly, but I believe Redis is more widely used these days. I don't think so. This is not my belief that Redis is... I actually, my impression is that Redis was huge almost 10 years ago. So as it came out, it was, I heard over and over again about Redis, and now it's a little bit more silent. This is my impression. And also what Redis tries to do is almost, it's not only a cache, becomes a solution. They try, to compete with Kafka streams and stuff like that. Now, Daniel asked me, the government doesn't want data hosted elsewhere other than on premises, but thanks, very good pointers. For instance, in some of my projects, we are actually forced to go to the cloud to provide a secure solution, which is more secure than on premise. And most of the clouds are more certified than or they are better certified the on-premise solution. But I get you. So there is, you should not, force governments to to change their opinion. Okay, Fernando Comunello asked me, to scale out JSF application, it is necessary to use sticky sessions. If you have sessions, it is necessary to have HTTP session, and this session the load balancer can be configured to have sticky sessions, or the session could replicate or be stored in a central database. In the case of enterprise application where scale is predictable, JSF brings a lot of productivity together with prime faces. Very true. So prime faces is great. JSF I also like. And you can use JSF with prime faces and implement productive applications. Still, the problem is many developers don't like JSF. And then we have, the popularity and marketing problem. And if this is the case, it is really hard to argue against the entire world that JSF is still great and developers don't like to use it. So, but it's also my impression, prime faces. And by the way, of course, in my AHEX FF, there's a chat with prime faces creator. Prime faces. And this was with Chatai. Okay. Now, the question still, Fernando asked, however, for public web application, is it better to just use server-side templates engine like Qt following web standards or SPI applications, of course? What means better? I mean, if you go, let's say concretely, if you go to AWS and you have ECS Fargate, right? So this is the Fargate, and ECS is Elastic Container Service, is similar to Docker. So you have two Docker containers. Then you have an ELB application load balancer, which balances the load between two containers. So you can configure the ELB to have sticky sessions, and then it will work like on-premise, no difference. So you can absolutely have JSF in the cloud, no problem at all. So what's the problem with that? It is really hard to make it work on AWS Lambda. So you will have to pay for two Docker containers plus ELB all the time. And on AWS Lambda, if this is stateless, you will pay per invocation. So maintaining the ECS Fargate or running Fargate the entire time can be cheap if there's lots of load. If there's not that much load, like less than, I would say, 2 transactions per second the entire month, then Lambda becomes cheaper. So this is just I would say the entire cloud discussion is just about costs. I also refer it to cost-driven development, right? So, or cost-driven architecture in the cloud. So we can have, Kubernetes with 50 nodes and you will pay 5,000 euros for a simple service in the cloud and no one will use it. Or we can have, less funky architecture with an AWS Lambda will cost you 10 euros a month. That's the difference. And so I would say the discussion in the cloud is completely different to discussion on premise, because on premise it didn't matter a lot whether my machine is running all the time or not, because the machines are always running on premise, right? So thank you. I think we covered a lot. So Twitter was lazy, chat was hyperactive, which was nice. So I would say see you at AHEX Live soon. So you can register via Meetup or Eventbrite or directly as always. See you the next AHEX TV 97th in April, beginning of April. And even in project. So thank you and bye.